Now, are the Igbo people of Nigeria actually Jews, or are they just another set of Africans? Not only the Igbo people of Nigeria, are the black people in general also the original Jews? Because I'm sure if you are on the internet in the past few years, you would have seen many people claiming that black people are the original Jewish people. And there are different levels to these radical ideologies. Some of them are certain of other Jewish people, while some of them exclusively claim that they alone are the actual Jewish people, or the Hebrew people, as they might love to put it. Now, this history near starts in the early 2000s, maybe when we had internet. It actually began in the year 1880, at least, when during this era two Afro-American pastors or preachers, Frank Cherry and William Saunders Crowdy, started preaching doctrines that combined their personal interpretation of Christianity, Judaism, Freemasonry, and New Thoughts, which was kind of precursor to modern day new religious movements. Now, their core doctrine can be summarized into the following statements: all black people are the original Israelites who were chased into Africa after the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans and the later expulsion of some Jews who were in Spain, because some Jews actually were in Spain and they were chased out of Spain, and many of them migrated to Africa. And this one is factual, is proven historically. And this actually happened around the time of the Spanish Inquisition and the Reconquista. And this also happened towards the later years of the Crusades and just before Christopher Columbus began his voyage to the Americas and the other Portuguese began their voyages also to Africa. However, these two preachers and their disciples, they don't identify as Jewish people, neither are they associated with mainstream Judaism. Later in the mid-1900s, a few of them migrated into Liberia, and then from Liberia they migrated into Israel, and today they constitute the minority group in Israel known as Black Hebrew Israelites. And this one is much more distinct from Beta Israel. Beta Israel is another faction of African Jews, black Jews actually, from Ethiopia and Eritrea, and Beta in Aramaic or Ge'ez means house. So Beta Israel means house of Israel. Now, while some migrated to Israel, a large majority still remained in the USA, and they are known to spread some kind of strange teachings, particularly ones that suggest racial superiority, particularly black supremacy. And they also preach some form of anti-Semitic perspective. Not all of them do, but many of them are quite anti-Semitic, as they see the modern day Jewish, the Ashkenazi Jews, as pretenders who claim to be Jews but are not actually Jewish people. They are also known also for black separatism, more like ethnic nationalism. So they want black people to have a separate, at least state or a separate country in the Americas for just black people, and particularly for black Jews. And this period when these black people, as Jewish people, as Hebrew people, Hebrew Israelites began to gain popularity, it was also around the same time that the Muslim population of the black people also began to have some resurgence. Yes, at the time of the slave trade era, some Muslims were taken into the Americas. Some of them were forced to convert to Christianity, and some of them retained their Islam. You go around the Americas, you find many mosques. But during this period, we had also a kind of fringe doctrines, not in line with the mainstream Orthodox Islam. And an early precursor to this was the Moorish Science Temple, after which different groups came up, like the Nation of Islam, which most of you are known, are popular with, are famous with. But then this Moorish Science Temple existed in the late 1800s to the early 1900s, and its role now is much more less visible in society, unlike in those earlier years. And this Moorish Science Temple was started by Noble Ali Drew, and he believed that black people are Moorish people, are Arabs, and are not really black people, and he called himself Hamitic people, and he said they're not black skinned, they are olive skinned. and some other kind of funny conspiracy theories and identity crisis that was reigning around this period. And I think I would make a separate video detailing some of these fringe religious groups, particularly among Afro-Americans in the diaspora. And maybe I'll also make another separate video in regards to this topic also taking place in the African continent. However, this does not negate the fact that there are some Jewish people, or there were some Jewish people in Africa prior to the 1900s even. And the very first Jew, or the very first ancestor to modern Jews, that is Abraham, lived in Africa for some time. If you read the Bible, in the book of Genesis chapter 12 from verse 10 to 20, you'll find evidence that Abraham visited Egypt, which was in Africa, or is in Africa. And not only Abraham, Jacob also lived in Africa. Aaron, the prophet, Miriam was associated with Moses. Zephaniah was a prophet. Simon of Cyrene, and even Saint Mark, the disciple of Christ, all at some point lived in Africa. As for Mark and Simon of Cyrene, they both lived in what we now call modern day Libya, but the rest of them lived in mostly Egypt at the time. Now, as a result of this long-lasting legacy of Jewish people living in Africa for thousands of years, there are some population of Jewish people that are, I'll say, verified or have been verified by historical fact, historical data, and as well as DNA backings. Now, in regards to the topic of Jewish people in Africa, there were multiple African Jewish communities from Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, and Libya. They were likely referred to as Alexandrian Jews, that's in Egypt, named after the city of Alexandria, which I said earlier was the capital when the Hellenistic period of Egypt began. Or they were also referred to as Berber Jews, that is, if they were living among the Amazigh people of the Maghreb. So in the Maghreb, some of them were converts, some Amazigh people converted from their various ethnic religion, and they began practicing Judaism. And in fact, till today you still find some Amazigh Jew that live primarily in Morocco. Tunisia has very little of them, but majority of North African Maghrebi Jews today live in Morocco. Outside of the Maghreb and Egypt, we still have, or at least we had, history of Jews in modern countries like Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti, Sudan. And while in West Africa, we had the Jews of Bilad, el-Sudan. And this one is very crucial. Jews in West Africa. West Africa is often seen as majority Muslim, and maybe we didn't have early Christians for some time. But there are proofs that Jewish people once lived in West Africa. And the word Bilad el-Sudan, at least Sudan, in my own understanding in Arabic, means the Sahel region. So Bilad el-Sudan, I think, is the land of the black man. So the regions from Mauritania down to Ethiopia could have been referred to as Sudan in ancient antiquities or in the medieval period. So it's not like the modern day Sudan that is just below Egypt or just south Egypt. And in fact, the countries of Mali and Niger at the time of European colonization were referred to as French Sudan, while the nation of Sudan and South Sudan were referred to as British Sudan. So you could see that the word Sudan was very deep, but only two countries inherited the word Sudan as their name, that is Sudan and South Sudan, while the other word Guinea, which also means black people, actually was inherited by many other African countries: Guinea Conakry, Guinea Bissau, Equatorial Guinea, and even New Guinea, which is not even in Africa. Now, back to the Jews of Bilad el-Sudan. For example, the West African historical work of Tariq al-Sudan and Tariq al-Fatash from the 15th and 16th century respectively recorded the Abba family, who were Jewish settlers in the city of Timbuktu. In fact, the Jewish Rabbi Mordecai Abisero, who was a trader in pre-colonial Mali between 1859 and 1880, and this was the last verified Jewish rabbi in West Africa. And some of them converted from Judaism to Islam, while some of them left the Sahel region to other parts of the world, because at the time, and that is from the 14th century upward, some of these emperors from the Sahel converted from their various pre-Islamic religion to Muslims. And prior to the conversion, many of them were not really bothered about the Jewish people. They saw them as just another nation that came here to trade, because West Africans are known to be very good traders. And in fact, most of the world were traders. That's how we survived. And that's how we still survive to this day. But at the time they converted to Islam, due to the difference in doctrines, they had to force some of the Jewish people to leave. Primarily, this was the region that was or constituted the Songhai and the Mali Empire. Now that I've mentioned some verified Jewish population that were either written down by other historical observers, primarily people who are not even Jewish themselves, maybe Christians or Muslims or even other ethnicities like Arabs or Europeans, it's important to know that there are also some claims by some people who believe they are Jewish people, but these claims have not been verified. And primarily this began from the 20th and 21st century. However, we have seen an increase in some unverified group of people claiming to be Jews. Some claim to be descendants of Jews who migrated into the region and intermarried with local population. Although a few of them have been proven correct via genetic testing, and a gene common in the Levant have been found to be present, and a few of them have converted to mainstream Orthodox Judaism. However, their approach tends to be much more different from that of the black Hebrew Israelites, which is mostly based among black Americans, in that they identify as Jewish people, unlike those other ones, our brothers in the diaspora, who do not identify as Jewish people. They see themselves as Hebrews but not Jews, and they usually do not preach black supremacy or black separatism. Now, some of these groups you're already familiar with, like the Igbo people of Nigeria, who claim that they are descendants of God. Some of them, there are different stories to this. The most popular one of them claims that when Moses was trying to cross the Red Sea, one of the people of Israel was so impatient to swim across the Red Sea, or he was discouraged by the sight of the Red Sea, and he turned back and began migrating, or he crafted a boat and began sailing, and he landed in southeastern Nigeria. I don't know how that was possible back then, but it's possible anyways. However, this is unverified, and there are some also who say they're the descendant of God, and Arai, or what, one of them migrated from Palestine down to the interior of Africa. However, they are not large-scale verification of this kind of migration or migratory trend. Now, back to the Igbo Jews of Nigeria. Their claim to Judaism actually predates those two early Afro-American preachers that I highlighted earlier. And the fact that Olaudah Equiano argued that the Igbo people, that is his countrymen, were potentially descendants of the lost tribes of Israel, based on strong similarities in manners, customs, and religious practices. He cited practices such as circumcision, ritual cleansing, and dietary taboos, and other similar societal structures to suggest a common ancestry. And one particular societal structure that might suggest this common ancestry, besides patriarchy and maybe more important role of the women in some perspective, one of the most important ones that many of them have been highlighting in the past few years is a culture that was very popular in pre-modern Igbo societies. And this particular culture required the younger brother of a deceased man to marry the widow of his elder brother. Now, this culture was very peculiar to the Jewish people at the time, but that doesn't mean that only the Jewish people practice this culture. For example, I've seen documentaries that showed Aboriginal Australians also practicing this culture, where a young man will have to marry inherit the wives of his elder brother. So while it was very rare at the time, however, it doesn't mean that anybody that shared this culture automatically shared some kind of ancestry And even some other thing he mentioned also was circumcision. Now, why I pointed out circumcision was maybe some of them at the time, their neighbors were not practicing circumcision. So when they heard that another group was practicing circumcision, they felt, oh, we must be related to those groups. But circumcision is not only associated with Judaism, and in fact, there are many depictions of the acts of circumcision in ancient Egyptian temples. And even there's a portion of the Bible that even mentions Egyptians, Sumerians, and Sabaeans, Sadeans, and I think Persians and Babylonians as well, as people that practice circumcision but do not keep the law of circumcision. For example, it highlights the fact that the Egyptians shaved the hair at the side of their head, which was a taboo in ancient Jewish practice. So that's why you find many Orthodox Jews today, they have what they call side curls. They keep the hair on the sides. They can shave away their hair, but the ones on this side will be left alone. So the Egyptians circumcised, but they shaved the hair here. And then the particular book that this prophet highlighted these things, the prophet saw it as kind of against the will of God. So, saying that the Jewish people had many cultures, and some of those cultures were not exclusively shared by them alone or practiced by them alone, there are some other pockets of human societies that also practice these cultures. So you can see, if everyone wants to claim to be Jewish people simply based on some few similarities, it won't really go down, and we'll have thousands and thousands of Jewish people. Now, the Igbo people of Nigeria are the most prominent group that claim to be Hebrew or Jewish people. Another group also is the Efik people, but Efik people do not actively seek to convert to Judaism. Some of them just believe that they are Jewish people, and this could be somehow true because some of the Efik and the Igbo people of Nigeria are actually, some of them, not all of them, some of them are mixed with Portuguese people, and some of the Portuguese explorers that were sent to West Africa at the time were actually Jewish people who were expelled from Europe at the time, and towards the end of the Spanish Inquisition and the Reconquista. So the average Spaniards or Portuguese were not willing to take the risk of going to die in sea. So most of the explorers they sent to West Africa, like the Benin Empire, the Ashanti Kingdom, or the Fanti, were mostly Jewish people. So it could be possible that the Efik people have some Jewish connections based on that fact, but claiming that they migrated from Israel. I've had the classmates who believed heavily in this and said that black people were migrated from Israel and are the original Jewish people, but that one is not based on anthropological facts. Now, these ones are just from Nigeria. Let's go to Ghana. Now, in Ghana, the House of Israel claimed their Jewish ancestors migrated from ancient Mali, which could also be true because I mentioned earlier that there were some Jews in ancient Mali and some of them were forced to convert to Islam. Now, back to Nigeria again, there are some Yoruba people that also believe that they are descendants of Jewish people, and this one was very prominent with the Nigerian preacher, Bishop Ajayi Crowther, which was, I think he was an Anglican bishop. He was first of all sold into slavery, and he was returned to Africa. I think at the time slavery had ended or something like that. And then he came back, translated the Bible into Yoruba, and he has drawn many criticism. For example, he couldn't find a word for Satan in West Africa or in the Yoruba language, and so he substituted Satan with Eshu. Eshu is just a different deity, and Yoruba culture, Yoruba traditional religion consists of a pantheon of different gods. So imagine somebody just coming and claiming that one of your deities is the devil, and began to antagonize that deity. So it caused some kind of restiveness among the Christians and the traditional practitioners of the time. However, this claim to Yoruba people as being Jewish people is not universally held by all Yorubas, and many of them are in fact proud of their Yoruba culture. Few of them practice Islam and Christianity, do not even use that as a means to claim to be Jewish people, unlike some other ethnic groups in West Africa or in the world at large. The Zako people of Mali, who claim to be descendants of the Abba family, that is a group of Moroccan traders who were forced to convert to Islam in the 15th century, also claim to be Jews, and there are some elements of truth in that as well. The Yeber nomads also claim to be of Jewish descent and claim to predate the influx of Somalis into the Horn of Africa down to Southern Africa. The Lemba people of Zimbabwe and South Africa, the Baluba of Angola and DRC, that's Congo, as well as the Beta Abraham, a group of Ethiopian Jews who were forced to convert to Orthodox Christianity in the 15th century, also all constitutes a group of unverified Jewish population. I use the word unverified because their claim to Judaism is kind of mixed. Now, it's important to note that this claim of being Jewish people most times is as a result of identity crisis and inferiority complex. Now, I'm not claiming that Jewish people didn't migrate to Africa. There are many evidence, and some of them I've mentioned in this video, like right from the early patriarchs, Abraham, Jacob, Moses, and the many others that were Jewish people and lived in Africa at some point, and also the medieval Jewish population that even migrated down to West Africa. So it's highly possible that many of us in West Africa have Jewish ancestry. However, this is important to note that not all of us, and for the fact that we may have this ancestry, it just proves that humans have always been migrating, and there's no real difference between all of us. Malagasy people who are actually from, mostly, not all of them, some of them are from what we call Indonesia today, have also been migrating. You find some people in Southern Africa that might have these genetics, and there are also some South Africans who just look Asian, the Khoikhoi and the San people in particular, and you find some West Africans that look like Europeans, particularly the Tuareg nomads and the other people in Mauritania. So it shows you that humans, we are all just interconnected and we cannot do without each other. And this particular wave of identity crisis, it follows a trend of black people claiming to be everything. And in recent years, particularly on posts on Facebook, YouTube, Quora, Reddit, you find people who are of African descent claiming to be the original Jews, the original Arabs, the original Aboriginal Australians, the original Greeks, the original Romans, the original Chinese, the original Japanese, the original Red Indians. Yet, they deny their very ethnic identity. So imagine claiming to be all these things, claiming to be Red Indians, claiming to be Greenlandic, Inuit people, claiming to be Polynesians, claiming to be Malay, claiming to be Javanese, but yet they don't want to admit that they are black Africans. And this one in particular is very common among Afro-Americans, where some of them, they call themselves foundational black Americans. When it comes to the word foundational black Americans, there are two perspectives to it. One of them, because now we have had modern day migration from Africa to the Americas. So when this influx of new Africans get there, it might create kind of confusion where maybe recent migrants might want to benefit from some of the services that have been provided for this particular ethnic group, that is the black Americans. So they distinguish themselves with the term foundational black Americans. That means they have been there before the modern or current influx of Africans to the Americas. And there are also another faction of foundational black Americans who deny any connection to Africa. And this one is the more extreme cultural appropriation faction of these foundational black Americans. They believe that they don't have any connection to Africa, they just look black, and they justify this by pointing fingers at the Aboriginal Australians and the Melanesians and even the Polynesians as well. Now, Aboriginal Australians, they're often depicted as having silky long hair, like how European hair would look like, or having a facial structure of an African. Though not exactly like this, but very similar. But then there are also some Aboriginal Australians, particularly in Tasmania and the Torres Strait Island of Northern Australia, where you find people with Afro hair. They don't have the normal or the average straight hair of the other Aboriginal Australians. It just shows you how diverse human populations can be. And even just across the border or across the sea, the Papua New Guineans, Solomon Islanders, Bougainville, and other groups of people that are in the region of Australasia, you might find many of them who look black, and even some New Zealanders, that is Maori people, the native people. I've seen multiple photos of some Maori people that look like African. They may not be black, exactly black, but they look a little bit lighter skinned, but brownish and with a Afro hair. So they justify their claim to being Aboriginal Americans by claiming that some Melanesians or Aboriginal Australians sailed by boats into the Americas. And this one is one of the also unverified groups of migrated trying to the Americas. I think I'll make a separate video of this because there have been arguments as to who discovered the Americas. Is it Christopher Columbus? Is it the Vikings? Or is it even an emperor from ancient Mali in West Africa? Because there are also historical records from both Africans and from Europeans proving that an African emperor migrated across the ocean seeking for new land to conquer. But this one is also unverified. In conclusion, this video does not aim to refute any claim that any African has Jewish ancestry. Besides, there are still countless Jews in Africa as in other continents of the world. By the way, you can become a Jew by conversion. Thank you. Subscribe to this channel. Bye bye.